Elena's hands trembled as she stepped back from the porch railing. Daniel's shadow still stretched across the weathered wood between them. "You deserve someone younger," she said, the words catching in her throat like dust from the Montana wind. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched her with those steady gray eyes that had been watching her for weeks now. Then he smiled, not the kind that mocked, but the kind that knew something she didn't. "That's not your decision to make," he said quietly, and her heart cracked open like spring ice. Before we continue with Elena and Daniel's story, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and stay with me until the very end. Please comment below with the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The morning Daniel Carter first walked into Elena Ward's boarding house, she was on her knees scrubbing blood out of the front hallway floor. Not her blood. A drifter had gotten into a fight the night before, stumbled in drunk, and bled all over the pine boards before she'd pushed him back out into the street. Now the sun was barely up, and she was working lye soap into the grain, her hands raw, her back aching, her mind already calculating whether she'd have enough guests this week to cover the butcher's bill. She heard boots on the porch, but didn't look up. "Boarding house is full," she called out. "Try the Miller place, 2 streets over." "I'm not looking for a room." The voice made her pause, deep, calm, like someone who didn't need to raise it to be heard. She sat back on her heels and finally looked up. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, the early light cutting across his shoulders. Tall, maybe 40, with the kind of weathered face that came from years under the sun. His clothes were clean but worn, his boots dusty from riding. He didn't look like trouble, but Elena had learned that trouble rarely announced itself.
"Then what are you looking for?" she asked.
"Work," he said. "Heard in town you might need help with repairs." Elena frowned. "Who told you that?" "The blacksmith. Said your porch steps are rotting through, and you've been putting off fixing them." She had been. For 3 months now, telling herself she'd get to it when she had time, when she had money, when she had energy. The truth was, she had none of those things. "I can't pay much," she said. "Didn't ask what you'd pay." She studied him for a long moment, this stranger offering help she hadn't asked for. In Silver Creek, nothing came free. People wanted something, always. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel Carter." "You new to town?" "Came in yesterday. Bought the old Henderson ranch north of here." Elena's eyebrows lifted slightly. The Henderson ranch had been sitting empty for 2 years after old Thomas Henderson died without heirs. It was good land, but it needed work. Lots of work.
"That place is half falling down," she said.
"I know."
"You planning to fix it yourself?"
"Eventually."
"Then why are you here offering to fix my steps?"
Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that caught her completely off guard. "Because you look like you could use the help." Elena felt her chest tighten. She stood up slowly, brushing her hands on her apron, trying to ignore the way her knees protested. 39 years old, and her body already felt 50. "I don't need charity," she said, keeping her voice level. "Wasn't offering charity," Daniel replied. "Was offering work. I need to get to know the town, figure out who's honest, who's not. Thought helping folks might be a good start." It was a reasonable answer. Too reasonable. Elena had lived in Silver Creek long enough to know that reasonable answers usually hid less reasonable intentions. "The steps are out back," she said finally. "Lumber's in the shed. If you want to fix them, but I'm not paying you until I see the work done right." Daniel nodded once, put his hat back on, and walked through the house like he'd been there before. Elena watched him go, then returned to scrubbing the blood from her floor. She told herself she wouldn't think about him again. That lasted about 3 hours. By noon, the back steps were rebuilt. Elena came out with a pitcher of water and found Daniel sitting on the new wood, testing the boards with his weight. They didn't creak, didn't shift. They were solid in a way they hadn't been in years. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. "Nothing yet," Daniel said, taking the water she offered. "Steps were easy, but your roof's got a leak on the west side. Saw it from the ladder. You want me to patch it before the next rain?" Elena's jaw tightened. The roof had been leaking for a month. She'd been putting a bucket under it at night, emptying it every morning, pretending it wasn't getting worse. "I told you I can't pay much," she said. "And I told you I'm not asking for much." "Then what are you asking for?" Daniel looked up at her, squinting against the sun. "A fair meal when the work's done. That's all." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to leave, wanted to protect herself from whatever this was. But the truth was, she needed the help. Desperately. And if all he wanted was a meal... "Fine," she said. "Fix the roof. I'll make you supper." He nodded and stood, moving past her into the shed to find the tar and shingles. Elena stood there, holding the empty pitcher, wondering what she'd just agreed to. That evening, Daniel ate at her kitchen table while the last of the daylight died outside. Elena had made stew, simple, nothing fancy, but hot and filling. Daniel ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd spent years on cattle drives, learning not to waste food. He didn't talk much, didn't ask questions, just ate and occasionally nodded when she refilled his bowl. It should have been comfortable. Instead, it made Elena nervous. "You always this quiet?" she asked finally. "You always this suspicious?" he replied. She almost smiled. Almost. "I've lived in this town long enough to know when something doesn't add up," she said. "You bought a ranch that needs a year's worth of work, but instead of working on it, you're here fixing my roof. Why?" Daniel set down his spoon and looked at her directly. "Because I wanted to." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Elena felt her frustration rising. "Look, Mr. Carter."
Daniel, she corrected. "I appreciate the help, but I don't understand what you want from this. From me. So if you're looking for something..."
"I'm not looking for anything," he said calmly. "I'm just helping."
"Nobody just helps."
"I do." The certainty in his voice stopped her. Elena sat back in her chair, studying him across the table. He didn't look away, didn't fidget, didn't offer elaborate explanations. He just sat there, steady as stone, waiting for her to believe him. She didn't, but she wanted to. "The stew's good," Daniel said after a moment. "Thank you." Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. When he left that night, she locked the door behind him and stood in the quiet house, listening to her own heartbeat. She told herself this was nothing. A stranger being kind. It happened sometimes. It didn't mean anything. But when she went to bed that night, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her. Not like she was broken, like she was someone worth fixing a roof for. Daniel came back the next day, and the day after that. He fixed the fence along the property line, replaced a broken window, rehung the door to the root cellar. Each time, Elena tried to pay him, and each time, he refused anything more than a meal. The pattern continued for 2 weeks, and Silver Creek noticed. "I saw that new rancher at your place again," Mrs. Patterson said one afternoon, when Elena was buying flour at the general store. Her voice carried just loud enough for the other women to hear. "That's the 3rd time this week." "He's doing repairs," Elena said evenly. Mrs. Patterson hummed, her eyes gleaming with something Elena recognized as gossip taking root. "Seems like a lot of repairs." "The house is old." So's mine. Don't see him offering to fix my fence. Elena felt her face flush, but she kept her voice steady. Maybe because I'm the one who needed it fixed. Or maybe, Mrs. Patterson said, leaning in closer, he's looking for something else. Elena met her gaze. And what would that be? Well, you're a widow with property. He's a single man who just bought a ranch. Some might say that's convenient. The words landed like stones. Elena felt them settle in her chest, heavy and cold. If you're suggesting, I'm not suggesting anything, Mrs. Patterson said sweetly. Just saying what others might think. You know how people talk. Elena paid for her flour and left without another word. But the damage was done. That night, when Daniel showed up to fix the loose shutter on the second floor, Elena met him at the door. You don't need to keep coming here, she said. Daniel paused, hammer in hand. There's still work to do. The house is fine. The shutter's about to fall off. I'll manage. He looked at her for a long moment, and Elena saw something shift in his expression. Not anger, understanding. Someone said something, he said quietly. It doesn't matter. It does if it's making you uncomfortable. Elena wanted to lie, wanted to say she was fine, wanted to pretend the whispers didn't bother her. But the exhaustion of maintaining that pretense suddenly felt like too much. People are talking, she admitted. About you, about me, about why you keep coming here. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're calling desperate. The word came out harder than she'd intended, but it was true. She'd heard it that morning, whispered behind hands at church. Desperate widow, clinging to the first man who showed her attention. Daniel set the hammer down on the porch railing. Is that what you think? He asked. That I'm here because you're desperate? I don't know why you're here, Elena said, her voice cracking. And that's the problem. I don't know what you want, and I can't afford to guess wrong. I want to fix your shutter, Daniel said simply, and maybe talk to you while I do it. That's all. Why? Because I like talking to you. The honesty of it hit her like a physical thing. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes and hated herself for it. You don't even know me, she whispered. Then let me, Daniel said. And that's when Elena realized she was terrified. Not of him, of hope. She let him fix the shutter. And the next day, when he showed up with medicine after hearing she'd caught a cold, she let him leave it on the porch. And the day after that, when he brought fresh venison from a hunt, she let him stay for coffee. Slowly, carefully, like learning to walk after a long illness, Elena let Daniel into her life. Not all at once, just gradually. He told her about his years on cattle drives, about losing his parents young, about buying the Henderson Ranch because he was tired of moving and wanted roots. She told him about her late husband, about the pneumonia that took him 5 years ago, about the loneliness that had settled into her bones like winter cold. They talked about small things, big things, everything in between. And somewhere in those conversations, Elena started to feel something she thought had died years ago. She started to feel alive. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything shifted. Daniel was helping her move a heavy trunk in the attic when he asked, "You ever think about selling this place?" Elena paused. "Why would I?" "It's a lot of house for one person." "It's my home." "I know," Daniel said carefully, "but it's also a burden. The repairs, the upkeep, the guests you have to manage, it wears on you." Elena felt her defenses rise. "I can manage." I know you can, he said. But you shouldn't have to. Not alone. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Elena wasn't ready to examine. What are you suggesting? She asked. Daniel set down the trunk and looked at her. Really looked at her. I'm suggesting, he said slowly, that maybe you don't have to do everything alone anymore. Elena's heart stuttered. Daniel. I know what people are saying, he continued. I know they think I'm after your property, or your money, or whatever else they've decided to gossip about, but that's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? He stepped closer, not threatening, just present. Because when I see you, he said quietly, I don't see a desperate widow, or a woman past her prime, or any of the other cruel things this town whispers. I see someone who survived things that would have broken most people. I see strength. I see courage. I see someone I want to know better. Elena felt her breath catch. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm 39 years old, Daniel. I'm not what? He interrupted gently. Not young, not perfect, not whatever impossible standard you think you need to meet? Yes, she whispered. He smiled then, that same smile from weeks ago, the one that knew something she didn't. Elena, he said, I don't want young. I don't want perfect. I want real. And you're the most real thing I've found in years. She should have laughed, should have told him he was crazy, should have protected herself from the inevitable disappointment. Instead, she said something that terrified her. I don't know how to do this. Do what? This, she gestured between them. Whatever this is becoming. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Neither do I. But I'd like to figure it out. If you're willing. And that's when Elena realized the choice wasn't about whether she deserved this. It was about whether she was brave enough to try. She was still thinking about that conversation 3 days later when Luke Maddox rode into town. Elena heard about it before she saw him, the whispers spreading through Silver Creek like wildfire. Luke Maddox was back. Luke Maddox, who owned the biggest ranch in the territory. Luke Maddox, who'd tried to buy the Henderson place before Daniel did. Luke Maddox, who didn't like losing. Elena was sweeping the front porch when he rode up, his horse expensive, his clothes finer than anyone else's in town. He tipped his hat with exaggerated politeness. Mrs. Ward, he said smoothly. Pleasure to see you. Mr. Maddox, she replied coolly. I heard Daniel Carter's been spending a lot of time at your place. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Hope he's not causing you any trouble. He's been helping with repairs. How generous of him. Luke's tone suggested it was anything but. Though I have to wonder why a man with a ranch to fix is spending so much time fixing someone else's property. Elena felt her spine stiffen. That's between him and me. Of course, Luke said, still smiling. Just seems odd, is all. Man like Daniel, he could have his pick of women. Younger women. Women who could give him a family, a future. He paused deliberately. Makes you wonder what he's really after. The words were poison, carefully administered. Elena felt them sink in, felt them find every insecurity she'd been fighting for weeks. I think you should leave, she said quietly. Just looking out for you, Mrs. Ward, Luke said, tipping his hat again. Wouldn't want you to get hurt. He rode away, leaving Elena standing on her newly repaired porch, feeling like the ground beneath her feet had just cracked open. Because Luke Maddox had said out loud what Elena had been thinking in the dark corners of her mind. Why would Daniel choose her? What was he really after? And how long until he realized his mistake? That evening, When Daniel showed up as usual, Elena met him with her decision already made. "You deserve someone younger," she said. And the story that would change both their lives began with his smile and the simple words, "That's not your decision to make." Daniel didn't move from where he stood on her porch, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows between them. "That's not your decision to make," he repeated, his voice steady. Elena felt her throat tighten. "Of course it is. I'm the one standing here telling you to find someone else." "And I'm the one standing here telling you no." The simplicity of it stunned her. No elaborate arguments, no pleading, just flat refusal. She'd expected him to leave, expected him to realize she was right and walk away like any sensible man would. Instead, he leaned against the porch railing like he planned to stay all night.
"Daniel, please. Did Luke Maddox say something to you?" he asked. Elena's silence was answer enough. Daniel's jaw tightened, the first real anger she'd seen from him. "What did he say?" "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." "He just reminded me of reality," Elena said, wrapping her arms around herself. "That's all." "Luke Maddox wouldn't know reality if it bit him," Daniel said. "He thinks everything's a transaction. Land, cattle, people. If he can't buy it or control it, he tries to destroy it." "Maybe he's not wrong about this." "About what?" Elena forced herself to say it. "About you having better options." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that caught her completely off guard. He laughed, not cruelly, but with genuine disbelief. "Better options," he repeated. "Like what? Some 20-year-old girl who giggles at everything I say and knows nothing about hard work? Someone who'd expect me to buy her fancy dresses and take her to Denver every month? Someone who could give you children," Elena said quietly. The laughter died. Daniel looked at her with an intensity that made her chest ache. "I had that chance," he said. "Years ago. There was a girl in Wyoming, pretty as a picture, young enough to give me a house full of kids. You know why I didn't marry her?" Elena shook her head. "Because every time I looked at her, I felt nothing," Daniel said. "No spark, no challenge, no fire, just nothing. I'd rather spend my life alone than spend it feeling nothing." "And what do you feel when you look at me?" The question came out as a whisper. Daniel stepped closer. "Everything." Elena felt tears burn her eyes. "You're going to regret this." "No," he said firmly. "I won't. But you might, if you let fear make your decisions for you." The words hit harder than any of Luke's poison, because they were true. "I need you to leave," Elena said, her voice breaking. "All right," Daniel said. He picked up his hat from the railing. "But I'm coming back tomorrow." "Why?" "Because your rain gutter's still broken," he said. "And because I'm not afraid of what people say. You shouldn't be either." He left before she could argue. Elena stood on her porch until the sun set, wondering how she'd managed to make everything more complicated. Daniel did come back the next day, and the day after that. But something had shifted. Elena felt it in every interaction, every conversation that stopped just short of going deeper. She was building walls, and they both knew it. He fixed the rain gutter without comment, brought firewood without asking if she needed it, showed up exactly when he said he would, steady as sunrise. And Silver Creek watched every moment. "Saw him at your place again yesterday," the butcher's wife mentioned when Elena came in for meat. "Staying later and later, isn't he?" "He was fixing the gutter." Takes a long time to fix a gutter, doesn't it?" Elena paid and left, her face burning. At the general store, two women stopped talking the moment she walked in, their sudden silence louder than any words.
At church on Sunday, she felt eyes following her, heard whispers that cut off when she turned her head. The town had decided what was happening between her and Daniel, and no amount of truth would change their minds. That Sunday afternoon, Daniel showed up with fresh trout he'd caught that morning. "Thought you might like these," he said. Elena looked at the fish, then at him. "People are talking." "I know." "It's getting worse." "I know that too." "Doesn't it bother you?" she asked, frustration bleeding into her voice. "No," Daniel said simply. "Should it?" "Yes, they're saying I'm—" She stopped herself. "You're what?" he pressed gently. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. "That I'm using you, or that you're using me, or that we're both fooling ourselves into thinking this is something it's not." "And what do you think it is?" The question was so direct, it took her breath away. "I don't know," she admitted. "Then maybe we should figure it out," Daniel said. "Together, instead of letting them figure it out for us." Before Elena could respond, a voice called out from the street. "Well, well, isn't this cozy?" Luke Maddox sat astride his horse, that same calculated smile on his face. Next to him was his foreman, Jack Riley, a hard man with harder eyes. "Maddox," Daniel said, his tone cooling. "Carter, brought you some fish, I see." Luke's gaze moved to Elena. "How thoughtful. Though I have to wonder if Mrs. Ward's boarding house is turning into more of a charity case than a business." Elena felt her face flush. "My business is doing fine, Mr. Maddox." "Is it?" Luke made a show of looking at the house. "Funny. Heard you had to turn away guests last week because you didn't have enough clean rooms ready. Hard to run a boarding house when you're distracted." The implication was clear, and it was a lie. Elena had turned away one drunk cowboy who'd tried to start a fight. But Luke had twisted it into something else entirely. "You heard wrong," Elena said coldly. "Did I?" Luke's smile widened. "My mistake. Though you have to admit, Daniel here has been taking up an awful lot of your time. Time you could be spending on paying customers." "That's enough," Daniel said quietly. "Just making conversation," Luke said innocently. "No harm in that, is there? After all, we're all friends here." He paused deliberately. "Though I do wonder what Thomas would think. Your late husband, God rest him. He worked so hard to build this place up. Shame to see it decline because you're too busy entertaining to keep it running properly." Elena felt like she'd been slapped. Bringing up Thomas, using his memory as a weapon. It was cruel in a way that made her want to scream. "Get off my property," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm on the public street, Mrs. Ward," Luke said pleasantly. "Free country and all that. But I'll leave you to your visit." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Daniel? Mrs. Ward? Good day." He rode off, Riley following behind, leaving a silence that felt like broken glass. "Elena," Daniel started. "Don't," she said. "Just don't." She went inside and closed the door, leaving Daniel standing there with fish nobody would eat. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Luke's words echoing in her mind. Thomas would be ashamed. The business was failing. She was neglecting everything for a man who'd eventually leave anyway. By morning, she'd made a decision. When Daniel showed up to repair the barn door, she was ready. "I need to focus on the boarding house," she said without preamble. "I've been letting things slide, and it's affecting business. So I think it's best if you stop coming around so often." Daniel set down his tools. "You don't believe that." "I do." "No, you believe what Luke Maddox wants you to believe," Daniel said. "That's different." "He was right about the boarding house." "He lied about the boarding house," Daniel interrupted. "You didn't turn away guests because of me. You turned away a drunk who tried to assault one of your other tenants. I know because I heard about it from the sheriff." Elena blinked. "How did you—" "Because I pay attention," Daniel said. "And because Luke Maddox has been spreading that story all over town, trying to make you look incompetent. He wants you to fail." "Why would he want that?" "Because your property borders the Henderson Ranch. If you fail, he can buy it cheap, and then he controls both parcels." Daniel's expression was grim. "He's done it before, to other people. Isolates them, destroys their reputation, drives them out." Elena felt cold. That's Luke," Daniel said flatly. "And it's working, because you're listening to him instead of trusting yourself." "I'm trying to protect myself," Elena said. "From what? From someone who actually cares about you? That's not protection, Elena. That's just fear." The words stung because they were true. Elena felt tears threatening and hated herself for it. "Maybe I have a right to be afraid," she said. "Maybe I've been through enough to know that things that seem too good to be true usually are." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "My wife died in childbirth." Elena froze. "What?" 12 years ago, Daniel continued, his voice steady but strained. "I was 28. She was 22. We'd been married less than a year. The baby didn't make it either." "Daniel, I'm telling you this," he said, "because I need you to understand something. I know what loss feels like. I know what it's like to be afraid of trying again. I spent 10 years avoiding anything that might hurt that much again." He looked at her directly. "And then I met you." Elena couldn't breathe. "You think I'm here because I don't know what I'm doing?" Daniel asked. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm choosing to risk being hurt again because you're worth the risk. The question is whether you're brave enough to risk it too." The truth of it crashed over Elena like a wave. He wasn't some naive man who didn't understand pain. He'd been where she was. He knew the cost, and he was choosing her anyway. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Neither do I," Daniel admitted. "But we could learn together. If you'd stop pushing me away long enough to try." Elena felt something crack inside her, some wall she'd been maintaining for years. "I'm scared." "I know." "What if it doesn't work?" "What if it does?" The question hung between them, full of possibility and terror. Before Elena could answer, a commotion erupted from the street. Shouting, the sound of running feet. Daniel turned toward the noise, his hand instinctively moving to the gun at his hip. Sheriff Morgan appeared at the gate, breathing hard. "Daniel, there's been an incident at the Henderson place." Daniel's face went hard. "What kind of incident?" "Fire. Your barn's burning." By the time they reached the Henderson Ranch, half the structure was engulfed in flames. Daniel didn't wait for the sheriff to organize. He grabbed buckets, started shouting orders to the handful of men who'd come to help. Elena found herself in the bucket line, passing water that felt pathetically inadequate against the roaring blaze. It took 2 hours to get it under control. When the smoke finally cleared, the barn was a total loss. Months of work, gone. Daniel stood staring at the wreckage, his face unreadable. "This wasn't an accident," Sheriff Morgan said quietly. He held up a broken kerosene lantern. "Found this in the back. Someone set this deliberately." "Luke Maddox," Elena breathed. "Can't prove it," the sheriff said, "but yeah, that'd be my guess too." Daniel was silent. Too silent. Elena touched his arm gently. "Daniel?" "I need to rebuild," he said, his voice hollow. "The lumber alone will cost—"
I don't have enough saved. I'll need to take out a loan, which means going to the bank that Luke Maddox owns half of, the sheriff finished grimly. Yeah. It was a trap. A perfect trap. Either Daniel went into debt to a man who wanted to destroy him, or he lost everything he'd worked for. There has to be another way, Elena said. There isn't, Daniel said. Not that I can see. He looked at her then, and Elena saw something in his eyes that broke her heart. Not defeat. Resignation. The look of a man who'd been fighting alone for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone fight beside him. And that's when Elena made her choice. How much do you need? She asked. Daniel frowned. What? How much do you need to rebuild? Elena, no. How much? She repeated firmly. I can't take your money. You're not taking it, Elena said. I'm offering it. There's a difference. You need that money for the boarding house. The boarding house is fine, she interrupted. It's not making me rich, but it's stable. I have savings. Not a lot, but enough to help. She looked at the destroyed barn, then back at him. Enough to rebuild this. Daniel shook his head. If you do this, the whole town will say you're throwing your money away on a man who's using you. Let them say it. Elena, you told me to stop letting fear make my decisions, she said. Well, I'm done being afraid. You helped me when I needed it. Now I'm helping you. That's how this works, isn't it? People helping each other? Something shifted in Daniel's expression. Not quite hope, but close. This isn't a small amount of money, he warned. I know. If we can't make the ranch profitable, you'll lose everything. Then we'd better make it profitable. The word we hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Daniel stared at her for a long moment, and Elena saw when he understood what she was really saying. This wasn't just about money. It was about choosing him.
About choosing them.
You're sure? He asked quietly. No, Elena admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. For the first time since the fire started, Daniel smiled. It was small, tired, but real. You're either very brave or very foolish, he said. Probably both, Elena replied. The sheriff cleared his throat. If you two are done having a moment, we should probably file a report about the fire, and maybe figure out how to keep Luke from burning down anything else. Elena looked at the ruins of the barn, then at Daniel, then back at the sheriff. We'll rebuild, she said firmly, and we'll do it in a way Luke can't touch. How? The sheriff asked. Elena wasn't sure yet, but for the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt ready to fight. News of the fire spread through Silver Creek faster than the flames had. By the next morning, everyone knew about the barn. And everyone knew Elena had offered to help pay for rebuilding it. The whispers became roars. At the general store, Mrs. Patterson made sure her voice carried. She's giving him money now? That poor deluded woman. She'll be bankrupt by Christmas. At the saloon, men placed bets on how long before Daniel took the money and disappeared. Even Pastor Williams pulled Elena aside after church. I hope you're being wise about this, Elena. A woman alone needs to protect herself. I'm not alone, Elena said quietly. The pastor's eyebrows rose. Oh? Elena met his gaze squarely. I'm with Daniel Carter, and that's all anyone needs to know. She walked out before he could respond, her heart pounding but her steps steady. That afternoon, Daniel came to the boarding house with plans for the barn rebuild. I've been thinking, he said, spreading drawings across her kitchen table. If we're going to do this, we should do it right. Build something Luke can't burn down next time. You think he'll try again? I know he will, Daniel said grimly. But if we use stone for the foundation and exterior walls, fire won't matter. It'll cost more, but it'll last. Elena studied the drawings. They were good, thoughtful, the work of someone who planned for the long term. "How long will it take?" she asked. 3 months, maybe 4. "That's a long time to be in Luke's crosshairs." "I know," Daniel said, "which is why I think you should reconsider this whole thing. It's not too late to back out." Elena looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd come into her life unexpected and unwanted, who'd fixed her roof and earned her trust, who'd stood on her porch and refused to leave when she'd tried to push him away. "I'm not backing out," she said.
"Even if it cost you everything?"
Even then. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was calloused, warm, solid. "Then I guess we're doing this together," he said. "I guess we are," Elena agreed. And in that moment, with their hands linked across rough drawings of a barn that didn't exist yet, Elena realized something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She wasn't just helping him rebuild a barn. She was rebuilding her own life. And this time, she wasn't doing it alone. The first stone for the new barn went down on a Tuesday morning, with half of Silver Creek pretending not to watch. Elena stood beside Daniel as the mason set the cornerstone, feeling eyes on her back like physical weight. She'd withdrawn nearly all her savings the day before, walked into the bank with her head high, while the clerk counted out bills with barely concealed disapproval. Word had spread before she'd even left the building.
"You sure about this?" Daniel asked quietly as the mason worked.
"Stop asking me that," Elena said. "I will when you stop looking like you're about to be sick." She almost laughed. Almost. "I'm fine." "You're terrified." "That too." Daniel's hand found hers briefly, squeezed once, let go before anyone could see. Even that small gesture felt dangerous now. Every touch, every glance, every moment they spent together was ammunition for the people who wanted to see them fail. The mason looked up from his work. "Going to need more hands if you want this done before winter. You got a crew lined up?" "Working on it," Daniel said. But they both knew the truth. Most men in town wouldn't work for Daniel now, not with Luke Maddox making it clear there'd be consequences for anyone who did. Elena watched the mason work, calculating costs in her head, trying not to think about what would happen if they couldn't finish before the first snow. "Elena Ward!"
The voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Elena turned to see Reverend Matthew striding toward them, his face set in lines of deep concern that didn't quite hide his judgment. "Reverend," she said carefully, "might I have a word?" He didn't wait for an answer, just gestured toward the road. "In private." Daniel stiffened beside her, but Elena touched his arm gently. "It's fine. Keep working." She followed the Reverend far enough that the mason couldn't hear. "I'm going to speak plainly," Matthew said, "because I care about your soul and your reputation, both of which are in jeopardy right now." "I appreciate your concern. This arrangement with Mr. Carter is inappropriate," he interrupted. "A woman alone, investing her life savings in a man she barely knows? It's reckless at best, scandalous at worst." Elena felt her jaw tighten. "Daniel and I are rebuilding a barn. There's nothing scandalous about construction."
"It's not the construction people are talking about," Matthew said. "It's the fact that you're spending every waking hour with him, that you're financially entangled, that you're—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Behaving in ways that suggest this is more than a business arrangement." "And if it is?" Elena asked quietly. Matthew's face hardened. "Then you're making a fool of yourself. Elena, you're a respectable widow. You have a position in this community. But if you continue down this path, associating yourself with a man who attracts trouble like Carter does, you'll lose everything. Your reputation, your business, your standing in the church." "Is that a threat?" Elena asked, her voice shaking. "It's a warning," Matthew said, "from someone who's watched this town tear apart people who step out of line. I'm trying to save you from that, By telling me to abandon someone who needs help? By telling you to protect yourself before it's too late.
Elena looked back at Daniel, at the half-built foundation, at the future they were trying to build together. Then she looked at the Reverend. "Thank you for your concern," she said coldly. "But I'll make my own choices about who I help and why." She walked back to Daniel before Matthews could respond, her hands trembling with anger she couldn't quite contain. "What did he say?" Daniel asked. "Nothing that matters," Elena lied. But it did matter, because that afternoon, 3 of her regular boarding house guests checked out early. No explanation, just polite excuses and avoiding eyes. By evening, she'd lost a week's worth of income. She sat at her kitchen table that night, doing the math over and over, trying to make it work. The numbers didn't lie. She was bleeding money faster than she'd anticipated. A knock at the door made her jump. Daniel stood on the porch, hat in hand, his expression serious. "We need to talk." Elena let him in, knowing what was coming. "You're losing business because of me," Daniel said without preamble. "Don't deny it. The whole town knows." "It's temporary." "It's not," he said firmly. "It's going to get worse. And I can't let you destroy everything you've built because of me." Elena felt panic rise in her chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should stop this. The barn, whatever this is between us, before you lose more than you can afford to lose." "No." "Elena." "No," she repeated, standing up. "You don't get to make that choice for me. I knew what this would cost. I made the decision anyway." "But you didn't know it would cost this much," Daniel argued. "You thought people would talk. You didn't think they'd actively punish you for it." "So what?" Elena's voice rose. "I should just give up because people are cruel? Abandon you because it's hard?" "Yes," Daniel said quietly, "because you deserve better than this." The words hit her like a punch. "Better than what? Better than someone who respects me? Who treats me like an equal? Who doesn't care that I'm not 20 years old anymore? Better than watching your life fall apart because of me?" Elena moved closer, forcing him to look at her. "My life was already falling apart. Slowly, quietly, in ways nobody could see. I was dying inside that boarding house, Daniel. Becoming invisible. You didn't cause that. You're the only thing that's made me feel alive in years." Daniel's expression cracked. "This isn't going to get easier." "I know." "Luke's going to keep coming. The town's going to keep judging. You're going to lose more than just money." "I know that too," Elena said. "But I'd rather lose everything fighting for something real than keep everything by living half a life." Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Elena couldn't breathe. "What?" "I'm in love with you," Daniel repeated. "Have been for weeks now. And that's why this is so hard. Because loving you means wanting what's best for you, even if that's not me." "You think you're not what's best for me?" "I think I'm what's costing you everything." Elena felt tears burn her eyes. "You're wrong." "Am I?" "Yes," she said fiercely. "Because everything I had before you, it wasn't worth keeping. It was just existing, not living. And I'm done existing, Daniel. I'm done being afraid and small and invisible. Even if it cost me everything, at least I'll have lived." Daniel reached for her then, pulled her close, and kissed her like a man drowning. It was desperate and honest, and full of everything they'd been holding back for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was shaking. "We're going to finish that barn," she said against his chest. "And we're going to make this work. I don't care what it takes." "Even if the whole town turns against us?" especially then. Daniel held her tighter. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Or the most foolish. Both, he agreed. Definitely both. The next morning brought a new crisis. Elena was serving breakfast to her remaining guests when Sheriff Morgan arrived, his expression grim. Elena, I need to talk to you about the property line dispute. Her stomach dropped. What dispute? Luke Maddox filed a claim with the county surveyor. Says your western fence is 3 feet onto his land. Wants it moved, or he's taking you to court. Elena felt the room tilt. That fence has been there for 15 years. Thomas put it up when we first bought the property. I know, Morgan said, but Luke's got a surveyor who says otherwise, and if he takes this to court, you're going to need a lawyer, which costs money you probably don't have right now. He was right. Elena had put everything into the barn. She couldn't afford a legal battle. When does he want an answer? She asked, her voice hollow. End of the week? That's 3 days. I know, Morgan said. I'm sorry, Elena. I tried to talk him out of it, but he's determined to make your life hell until you sell to him. After the sheriff left, Elena sat at the table, trying to think. Move the fence, and she'd be admitting Luke was right. Fight it in court, and she'd go bankrupt. There was no good option. Daniel arrived an hour later, saw her face, and immediately knew something was wrong. She told him about Luke's claim. He's lying, Daniel said flatly. That fence is on your property. I checked the original survey maps at the county office when I bought the Henderson place. Then why is his surveyor saying otherwise? Because Luke paid him to, Daniel said. It's what he does. Finds technical loopholes, bribes officials, whatever it takes to get what he wants. So what do I do? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I know someone, a surveyor in Helena who can't be bought. If I send for him, he can do an independent survey, but it'll take time. I don't have time. Luke wants an answer by Friday. Then we don't give him one, Daniel said. We tell him we're getting our own survey done. Make him wait. He'll just take me to court. Let him, Daniel said. By the time it gets to a judge, we'll have proof he's lying. It'll destroy his credibility. Elena wanted to believe it was that simple. But she'd seen how things worked in Silver Creek. Money talked, and Luke had more of it than anyone. This is what he wants, she said quietly, to bury me in problems until I give up. Then don't give up, Daniel said. Fight him. With what? I'm out of money, out of options, out of— You're not out of me, Daniel interrupted, and I'm not going anywhere. Elena looked at him. This man who kept showing up, kept fighting, kept believing in her when she couldn't believe in herself. Why? She asked. Why do you keep doing this? Because I love you, Daniel said simply. And because watching you fight is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The words broke something inside her. Elena started crying, really crying, for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Daniel held her while she fell apart, whispering that it would be okay, that they'd figure it out, that she wasn't alone. And for a moment, Elena let herself believe him. The Harvest Festival arrived 3 days later, like a storm nobody wanted, but everyone expected. Silver Creek's annual celebration filled the town square with music and laughter, and people in their best clothes. Normally, Elena would have helped organize it. This year, she'd almost stayed home. But Daniel had convinced her to come. Hiding gives them power, he'd said. Show them you're not ashamed. So Elena put on her best dress, the blue one Thomas had bought her years ago, and walked into town with her head high and her heart hammering. People stared. Of course they stared. Mrs. Patterson made a show of turning her back when Elena passed. The Reverend's wife gave her a look of pure pity. Even people who'd been kind to her for years suddenly found other places to be.
Elena felt each rejection like a knife, but she kept walking. Daniel met her near the dance floor, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt and jacket. "You came," she said. "Said I would."
Half the town is looking at us like we're about to commit a crime. "Let them look," Daniel said. He held out his hand. "Dance with me." Elena's eyes widened. "Daniel, that's—" "What, scandalous?" "Too late for that. We're already the talk of the town. Might as well give them something to talk about." "You're going to make everything worse." "No," Daniel said quietly. "I'm going to show them that I don't care what they think. And neither should you." Elena looked at his outstretched hand, then at the crowd of people watching them, waiting to judge. Then she took his hand and let him lead her onto the dance floor. The music was a simple waltz, but Elena barely heard it over the pounding of her heart. She could feel every eye on them, every whisper cutting through the air like broken glass. "You're shaking," Daniel said softly. "I'm terrified." "Me too." "You don't look it." "That's because I'm looking at you," Daniel said. "And when I look at you, nothing else matters." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of these people who wanted to see her broken. They danced for maybe 2 minutes before Luke Maddox's voice cut through the music. "Well now, isn't this touching?" The music faltered. People stopped dancing to watch. Luke stood at the edge of the dance floor, drink in hand, his face flushed with alcohol and malice. "The Widow Ward and her charity case," he continued, his voice carrying across the square. "How sweet." "Walk away, Luke," Daniel said quietly, not stopping the dance. "Why? This is a public celebration. I have every right to be here." Luke took a step closer. "Though I have to say, Daniel, you're setting yourself quite a standard. Dancing with a woman nearly 40? What's next? Courting the elderly?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cruel, cutting laughter. Elena felt her face burn, but Daniel's grip on her hand tightened. "That's enough," Daniel said. "Is it?" Luke's smile was vicious. "Because I think we're just getting started. Tell me, Mrs. Ward, does Mr. Carter know you're spending what's left of your savings on his little building project? Does he know you've lost half your boarders? Does he know—" "Shut your mouth," Elena said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Luke's eyebrows rose. "Oh, she speaks. How delightful. Though I wonder what your late husband would say if he could see you now. Thomas Ward worked his whole life to build that boarding house, and here you are, throwing it away on a drifter who could have any young beauty in Montana." The words landed like they were meant to, sharp and cruel and designed to destroy. Elena felt something inside her crack. She started to pull away from Daniel, humiliation burning through her like fire. But Daniel didn't let go. Instead, he pulled her closer, right there in the middle of the dusty town square, with the entire population of Silver Creek watching. And then he kissed her. Not gently, not tentatively, but with a fierce certainty that stopped the world. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted. The music died completely. When Daniel finally pulled back, his eyes were locked on Elena's, and his voice carried across the stunned silence. "I didn't choose her because she's young," he said clearly. "I chose her because she's the strongest heart I've ever known." Then he turned to face Luke Maddox and the entire town. "You want to know what I see when I look at Elena Ward?" Daniel continued. "I see a woman who survived losing everything and rebuilt her life with her bare hands. I see someone who helps strangers, even when she can barely help herself. I see courage and kindness and a strength most of you will never understand." His gaze swept across the crowd, and Elena saw people flinch under it.
You think her age matters to me? That a few years makes her less worthy of love? Then you're fools. All of you. Daniel's voice was steel.
And if you can't see what I see when I look at her, then you're not worth knowing.
The silence that followed was absolute. Elena stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, unable to move or speak or think, beyond the fact that Daniel Carter had just declared his love for her in front of everyone. Luke Maddox's face was purple with rage. "You'll regret this, Carter." "No," Daniel said calmly. "I won't." He turned back to Elena, cupped her face in his hands, and spoke softly enough that only she could hear. "Are you okay?" Elena couldn't speak. She could only nod, tears still falling, her entire body shaking with something that felt like breaking apart and coming together all at once. "Let's go home," Daniel said gently. He offered her his arm, and Elena took it, letting him lead her away from the crowd, away from the whispers that were already starting, away from everything. Behind them, the harvest festival slowly came back to life. But Elena didn't look back. She kept her eyes forward, her hand on Daniel's arm, her heart hammering with terror and hope and something that felt dangerously close to joy. Because for the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. Not despite her age, not despite her circumstances, not despite anything. Just her. And that changed everything. They walked in silence until they reached Elena's boarding house, the sounds of the festival fading behind them. Daniel stopped at the porch steps, but didn't let go of her hand. "You should probably go inside," he said quietly. "People will be watching." "Let them watch," Elena said, echoing his words from earlier. "You just kissed me in front of the entire town. A little hand-holding won't make things worse." "It might." "I don't care anymore," Elena said, and realized she meant it. The fear that had controlled her for weeks felt distant now, burned away by Daniel's public declaration. "Do you regret it? What you said?" "No." His answer was immediate. "Do you?" Elena thought about the gasps, the whispers, the shocked faces, about Luke Maddox's fury and Mrs. Patterson's horror, about how every single person in Silver Creek now knew exactly how she felt about Daniel Carter. "No," she said. "I don't." Daniel's expression softened. "You're shaking." "I know. It's not fear, though. I think it's relief." "Relief?" "We don't have to hide anymore," Elena said. "Everyone already knows the worst. There's nothing left to be afraid of." Daniel pulled her closer, his forehead touching hers. "That's where you're wrong. The worst is still coming. Luke won't let this go." "Then we'll face it together." "Elena." The sound of hoofbeats interrupted him. They turned to see Sheriff Morgan riding up fast, his face grim in the lamplight. "You two need to come with me," he said. "Now." Elena's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Fire at the Henderson place. Again." This time, it wasn't just the barn. Daniel's house was burning, flames eating through the structure he'd spent months repairing. By the time they arrived, half the roof had collapsed. Daniel stood frozen, watching years of work disappear into smoke. "Started about 20 minutes after you left the festival," Sheriff Morgan said. "Somebody saw it from town, rode out to check. By then it was too far gone." "Luke," Elena breathed. "Can't prove it," Morgan said. "He was at the festival the whole time. Dozen witnesses say so." "Then he paid someone," Daniel said, his voice hollow. "Doesn't matter. The result's the same." Elena watched the flames, calculating the loss. The house, the progress on the barn, everything they'd been working toward. Gone. and the money she'd given him couldn't rebuild this twice. "I'm sorry," Morgan said. "I'll investigate, but without proof." "Forget it," Daniel interrupted. "We both know how this works."
The sheriff looked uncomfortable, but didn't argue. "You got somewhere to stay tonight?" Daniel didn't answer. Elena made the decision for him. "He'll stay at the boarding house," she said. Both men turned to stare at her. "Elena, you can't," Daniel started. "I have an empty room," she said firmly. "You need a place to sleep. This isn't complicated." "It is to the people who just watched us at the festival," Daniel said. "If I stay at your place tonight, they'll assume—" "I don't care what they assume," Elena interrupted. "Your house just burned down. You're not sleeping in the cold because of gossip." "She's right," Morgan said. "Though, Elena, you know this won't help your reputation." "My reputation died at the festival," Elena said. "Might as well make practical choices now." Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. "Just for tonight. Just for tonight," Elena agreed, knowing it was a lie, knowing everything had just changed again. The room Elena gave him was on the second floor, the smallest one, usually reserved for short-term guests. "Bed's clean," she said, lighting the lamp. "There's water in the pitcher. If you need anything—" "Elena," Daniel said softly. "Thank you." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and turned to leave. "Wait," he said. She paused in the doorway. "I meant what I said," Daniel continued. "At the festival. Every word." Elena's throat tightened. "I know." "Do you?" He stepped closer. "Because I need you to understand something. This isn't gratitude. It's not desperation. It's not any of the things people will say it is." "Then what is it?" "Love," Daniel said simply. "Real, complicated, terrifying love. The kind that doesn't make sense on paper, but makes perfect sense here." He touched his chest. "I love you, Elena Ward, and I need to know if you feel the same." The question hung between them, demanding honesty. Elena had spent years avoiding this moment, this vulnerability, this risk. Had told herself she was too old, too damaged, too late for love. But standing here, looking at this man who'd lost everything twice and still chose her, she couldn't lie. "I love you," she whispered. "God help me. I love you." Daniel closed the distance between them and kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life to hear those words. This kiss was different from the one at the festival. That had been defiance, declaration, public proof. This was private, honest, full of everything they'd been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was crying. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked, wiping her tears with his thumb. "Nothing," she said. "Everything. I don't know. I never thought I'd feel this again." "Neither did I," Daniel admitted. "After Mary died, I told myself love was done for me, that I'd had my chance and lost it. Then you showed up with your stubborn pride and your kind heart and your absolute refusal to accept help, and I couldn't help myself." Elena laughed through her tears. "I did accept help. Eventually. Only after fighting me for weeks," Daniel said. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Good thing you like stubborn." "Good thing," he agreed. They stood there, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, until Elena finally forced herself to step back. "You should sleep," she said. "It's been a long day." "So have you." "I will. Just need to check on the other guests first." It was a flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. But Daniel didn't push. He just nodded and let her go, understanding that she needed space to process everything that had happened. Elena made her rounds, checking doors and windows, banking fires,
doing all the small tasks that gave her hands something to do while her mind raced. She loved Daniel Carter. She'd said it out loud. The whole town knew they were together. His house had burned down, and he was sleeping upstairs in her boarding house. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. Morning brought consequences. Elena woke to find a note slipped under her front door. No signature, just 3 words in crude handwriting. Whore. Leave town. She crumpled it without reading it to Daniel, but there were more. Anonymous letters. Ugly whispers. 2 more guests checked out before breakfast, their excuses transparent. By noon, the boarding house was empty, except for one elderly traveler who seemed oblivious to the drama. Elena sat at her desk, doing math that wouldn't work no matter how many times she rearranged the numbers. At this rate, she'd lose the boarding house within 3 months. Maybe 2. "You're going to wear a hole in that paper," Daniel said from the doorway. Elena looked up. He'd washed and changed into his spare clothes, but exhaustion still shadowed his eyes. "I'm trying to figure out how to keep this place running," she said. And I can't," she admitted. "Not without guests. And I won't have guests as long as—" She stopped. "As long as I'm here," Daniel finished. "I know. I'll find somewhere else." "That's not what I meant." "It's what needs to happen," Daniel said. "Your business is dying because of me, Elena. I won't let that continue." "Where will you go? Your house is ash. You don't have the money to rebuild both properties now." "I'll figure something out." "That's not a plan." "It's all I've got," Daniel said, frustration bleeding into his voice. "Unless you have a better idea?" Elena didn't. That was the problem. Every path forward seemed blocked. A knock at the door interrupted them. Elena opened it to find Dr. Harrison standing there, his medical bag in hand. "Doctor?" she said, surprised. "Is someone ill?" No. I'm here to talk to you." He glanced at Daniel. "Both of you, actually." Elena stepped aside to let him in. Harrison was one of the few people in town who'd never been cruel to her, though he'd also never been particularly warm. "I'll be direct," Harrison said once they were seated. "I heard about what happened at the festival, and about the fire last night." "Half the town heard about it," Elena said. "Yes, well, the other half is busy spreading lies about it," Harrison said. "Which is why I'm here. I want to help." Elena blinked. "Help how?" "I need someone to manage my household," Harrison said. "My wife died last year, and I've been struggling to keep things running. I can't pay much, but it's steady income. Enough to keep your boarding house afloat while you figure out what to do next." Elena stared at him. "You're offering me work?" "I'm offering you a lifeline," Harrison corrected, "because I'm tired of watching this town destroy good people for the crime of being happy." He looked at Daniel. "And I'm tired of watching Luke Maddox get away with burning down his competition." "You can't prove Luke did anything," Daniel said carefully. "No, but I can make it known that I support you anyway," Harrison said, "which might encourage others to do the same." Elena felt something crack in her chest. "Why would you do this?" "Because someone should," Harrison said simply. "And because my wife would have liked you. She always said this town needed more women with backbones." Before Elena could respond, another knock sounded at the door. This time, it was Mrs. Chen, the seamstress, carrying a basket. "I brought food," she said, in her quiet, accented English. "Heard about the fire. Thought you might need." Then came Thomas Miller, the blacksmith's son, offering to help rebuild at cost. Then old widow Peterson, who'd lost her husband the same year Elena lost Thomas, bringing blankets and quiet solidarity. One by one, people Elena had never expected to see knocked on her door with offers of help, small kindnesses, quiet rebellion against Luke Maddox's cruelty. Not everyone, not even most people, but enough. Enough to remind Elena that Silver Creek wasn't just judgment and whispers. There were good people here, too. People who'd been watching and waiting to see if she'd survive. And now that she had, they were choosing sides. By evening, Elena's kitchen table was covered with donated food and offers of work. Daniel sat beside her, looking shell-shocked. "I don't understand," he said. "Yesterday they were throwing insults. Today they're bringing bread." "Yesterday you embarrassed Luke Maddox in front of the whole town," Dr. Harrison said. "Some people found that inspiring. And some people are just tired of being afraid," Mrs. Chen added softly. "Luke has hurt many families. Someone needed to stand up first. You did." Elena looked around at these unexpected allies, feeling something shift in her chest. She'd thought she was fighting alone. But maybe she never had been. The next morning, Luke Maddox made his move. Elena was at Dr. Harrison's house, learning his household routines, when Sheriff Morgan found her. "Luke's filed a formal complaint with the county," he said without preamble. "Claims Daniel's been trespassing on his land, stealing cattle, and intimidating his workers." Elena felt cold. "That's all lies." "I know, but he's got signed statements from 3 of his ranch hands backing it up. The county judge wants Daniel to come in for questioning." "When?" "Tomorrow. And Elena," Morgan hesitated, "Luke's also challenging your property deed. Says there's evidence Thomas bought the boarding house land with money he borrowed from Luke's father 20 years ago. Claims the debt was never repaid, which means Luke owns a stake in your property." The room tilted. "That's insane. Thomas never borrowed money from anyone." "You have proof of that?" Elena tried to think. "The deed is in the county records, which Luke has access to through his position on the county board," Morgan interrupted. "He could have altered them, or created false records. Without Thomas here to defend himself—" "He can claim anything," Elena finished, her voice hollow. "This is about destroying us completely, isn't it?" "Yes," Morgan said bluntly. "And he's doing it legally, which means I can't stop him. You need a lawyer, a good one." "I can't afford a lawyer," Elena said. "I barely have enough to keep the boarding house running." "Then you need to find another way," Morgan said. "Because if Luke wins this, you'll lose everything. The boarding house, your savings, your reputation, everything." After Morgan left, Elena sat in Dr. Harrison's parlor, trying to breathe through the panic. She'd thought the worst was over, thought surviving the festival meant they'd weathered the storm. But Luke wasn't done. He wouldn't be done until she was broken. When she returned to the boarding house that evening, Daniel took one look at her face and knew. What happened? She told him everything. The false charges, the property claim, the legal trap closing around them. Daniel listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each word. "I should leave," he said when she finished. "What?" "If I leave Silver Creek, Luke loses his leverage. He's doing this to punish you for being with me. If I'm gone—" "No," Elena said fiercely. "Absolutely not." "Elena, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," she interrupted. "Luke isn't doing this just because of you. He's doing it because I refuse to be scared. Because we both refuse to be small. If you leave now, it tells him that worked. That fear wins." "And if I stay, you lose everything." "If you leave, I've already lost everything that matters," Elena said, her voice breaking. "Don't you understand? You're not the thing costing me my life, Daniel. You're the thing making my life worth living." Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "We're going to lose," he said against her hair. "You know that, right? Luke has money, power, connections. We have nothing." "We have each other," Elena said. "That's not enough to win a legal battle." "Maybe not," Elena admitted. but it's enough to keep fighting." They stood there in the quiet boarding house, holding onto each other like drowning people holding driftwood, knowing the next wave was coming, but refusing to let go. The hearing was set for 3 days later. In that time, Elena and Daniel tried everything. They searched for Thomas's financial records, hoping to prove he never borrowed from Luke's father. They talked to people who remembered the property purchase, looking for witnesses. They even went to the county office to examine the deed records themselves. Every path led nowhere. Luke had covered his tracks too well, or created enough false documentation to muddy the truth. Without concrete proof, Elena's word against Luke's wasn't enough. The night before the hearing, Elena couldn't sleep. She sat on her porch watching the stars, trying to prepare herself for losing everything she'd built. Daniel found her there past midnight. "Come to bed," he said gently. "I can't," Elena said. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Thomas's face. He worked so hard for this place, Daniel. He died believing it would keep me safe. And I'm about to lose it because I fell in love." "No," Daniel said firmly.
"You're about to lose it because Luke Maddox is a cruel man who destroys anyone who stands up to him. That's not your fault."
"Isn't it? If I just kept my head down, accepted my place, stayed invisible."
"You'd be miserable," Daniel interrupted. "You'd be safe and respectable and completely hollow inside. Is that really what you want?"
Elena didn't answer. "I asked you once if you were brave enough to risk being hurt," Daniel continued.
"Now I'm asking if you're brave enough to lose everything and start over." "I don't know if I am," Elena whispered. "Yes, you do," Daniel said. "You already did it once, when Thomas died. You can do it again."
"Not alone."
"You're not alone," Daniel said. "You have me. For better or worse, you're stuck with me, Elena Ward. Even if we lose the boarding house, even if we have to leave Silver Creek, even if we end up with nothing but each other, you're stuck with me."
Elena looked at him, this man who'd walked into her life uninvited and changed everything, and felt something settle in her chest.
"Promise me something," she said.
"Anything."
"Promise me that whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. No heroic sacrifices, no walking away to protect me. We stand together, or we don't stand at all."
Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I promise, but only if you promise me something too."
"What?"
"Promise me you'll marry me." Elena's breath caught.
"What?"
"Marry me," Daniel repeated. "Not someday, not when things are settled. Now, tomorrow, before the hearing."
"You're asking me to marry you the day I might lose everything?"
"I'm asking you to marry me because none of that matters," Daniel said. "Property, money, reputation, it's all just noise. You're what matters, and I don't want to waste another day pretending we have time to be careful." Elena felt tears streaming down her face.
"You're insane."
"Probably," Daniel agreed. "Is that a yes?" She should have said no. Should have waited, been practical, protected them both from making an impulsive decision in the middle of a crisis. Instead, she said, "Yes." Daniel kissed her then, deep and fierce and full of promise, and Elena kissed him back with everything she had. They'd lost the battle before it even started. The hearing tomorrow would probably take her property, her business, everything she'd built. But she'd won something far more valuable. She'd won herself back. And this time, she wasn't fighting alone. Dawn broke cold and clear over Silver Creek, and Elena Ward became Elena Carter before the sun fully cleared the mountains. There was no ceremony, no white dress, no flowers.
Just her and Daniel standing in Dr. Harrison's parlor at 6 in the morning, with the doctor serving as witness, and the elderly widow Peterson crying softly in the corner.
"Do you, Elena Margaret Ward, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Elena looked at Daniel, at the man who'd refused to leave when she'd pushed him away, who'd kissed her in the dust while the whole town watched, who'd asked her to marry him on the night they might lose everything. "I do," she said. "And do you, Daniel Joseph Carter, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Daniel said, his voice steady. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." Dr. Harrison smiled slightly. "You may kiss your bride, though given yesterday's performance at the festival, I suspect you don't need my permission." Daniel kissed her anyway, gentle and sure, and Elena tasted salt on her lips and realized she was crying. When they pulled apart, she was shaking. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked softly. "Nothing," Elena said. "Everything. I just married you 4 hours before we might lose everything we own."
"Then we'll lose it together," Daniel said, "as husband and wife." Mrs. Peterson pressed a handkerchief into Elena's hand. "Your Thomas would be proud," she whispered. "You chose love over fear. That takes real courage." Elena wasn't sure Thomas would have understood, but she nodded anyway, grateful for the kindness. They had 2 hours before the hearing. The county courthouse was already full when they arrived. Luke Maddox sat at the front with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man from Helena who looked like he ate homesteaders for breakfast. On the other side was an empty table where Elena and Daniel were supposed to sit, unrepresented because they couldn't afford counsel. The gallery was packed. Half the town had shown up to watch the spectacle. Elena felt every eye on her as they walked down the aisle. She kept her spine straight, her hand in Daniel's, refusing to show fear, even though her stomach was churning. They took their seats. The judge entered. The hearing began. Luke's lawyer stood first, presenting his case with surgical precision. He had documents showing a loan from Luke's father to Thomas Ward 20 years ago. He had records showing the loan was never repaid. He had witnesses who claimed Thomas had admitted the debt on his deathbed. All lies, Elena knew. But convincing lies, backed by paperwork that looked official and testimony that sounded credible. "Mrs. Carter," the judge said, and Elena started at her new name. "Do you have evidence to refute these claims?" Elena stood, her legs shaking. "I have my husband's word, Your Honor. Thomas Ward never borrowed money from anyone. He saved for 3 years to buy that property outright." "Do you have bank records proving this?" "No, sir. Thomas kept his money in a strongbox. He didn't trust banks." "Convenient," Luke's lawyer said smoothly. "No records means no proof." "It also means no debt," Elena said sharply. "That's not how the law works," the lawyer replied. "The burden of proof is on you to disprove our documentation. Without that proof—" "I have proof." The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Elena turned to see Sheriff Morgan standing, holding a leather-bound book. "I have Thomas Ward's personal ledger," Morgan continued, walking forward. "Every penny he earned, every expense he paid, recorded in his own hand for the last 30 years of his life, including the 3 years he saved to buy the boarding house property." Elena's heart stopped. "How did you—" "Found it in the evidence room," Morgan said. "Been there since Thomas died. We kept it in case there were estate questions. Figured now qualified." He handed the book to the judge. Page 47 shows the property purchase. Paid in full with cash. No mention of any loan. The judge opened the ledger, studied it carefully. His expression darkened. "Mr. Maddox," he said slowly, "this ledger contradicts your claim entirely. Can you explain that?" Luke's face had gone pale.
That could be forged. It's in Thomas Ward's handwriting, Morgan interrupted. I've seen his signature on dozens of documents. This is genuine. Then the loan was informal, Luke's lawyer tried.
A gentleman's agreement between friends. Thomas Ward and Luther Maddox were never friends, said a new voice.
Elena turned to see old man Hendricks standing up, his weathered face grim. He'd been one of the founding families of Silver Creek, respected by everyone.
I was there when Thomas bought that property, Hendricks continued. Watched him count out every dollar in cash at the land office. Luther Maddox wasn't anywhere near that transaction. I'll swear to it under oath.
The judge looked at Luke. Mr. Maddox, I'm beginning to suspect this claim is fraudulent. Your Honor, Luke's lawyer started, but the judge held up his hand. I'm not finished. Sheriff Morgan, I want that ledger examined by a document expert, and I want everyone involved in creating this so-called loan documentation investigated for fraud. He turned to Elena. Mrs. Carter, I'm dismissing this claim with prejudice. Your property is yours, free and clear. The courtroom erupted.
Elena sat down hard, unable to breathe. Daniel's hand found hers under the table and squeezed.
It's over, he whispered. You won.
But the judge wasn't done. Now, regarding the criminal charges against Mr. Daniel Carter, he continued, and Elena's relief turned to ice. Luke's lawyer stood again, recovering quickly. Your Honor, we have signed statements from 3 witnesses placing Mr. Carter on Mr. Maddox's property without permission on multiple occasions. I'd like to address that, said Dr. Harrison from the gallery. The judge frowned. Doctor? Harrison stood, looking uncomfortable but determined. I treated one of Mr. Maddox's ranch hands last month, Jack Riley. He'd been drinking and told me Mr. Maddox paid him $50 to sign a false statement about Mr. Carter. Said Luke wanted Carter run out of town by any means necessary. That's hearsay, Luke's lawyer objected. It's a doctor's testimony about a patient's admission, Harrison corrected. And I have 3 other ranch hands waiting outside who are prepared to testify that Mr. Maddox coerced them into signing false statements. They're willing to recant under oath. Luke stood up, his face purple with rage. This is a conspiracy. Sit down, Mr. Maddox, the judge said coldly, or I'll hold you in contempt. He looked at the lawyer. Unless you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, evidence that wasn't coerced or paid for, I'm dismissing these charges as well. The lawyer looked at Luke, who looked like he wanted to flip the table. After a long moment, the lawyer shook his head. We have no further evidence at this time, Your Honor. Then we're done here, the judge said. Charges dismissed. And Mr. Maddox, I suggest you be very careful about bringing frivolous claims to my court in the future. Next time, I won't be so lenient. He banged his gavel, and it was over. Outside the courthouse, people crowded around Elena and Daniel, offering congratulations and support. Even people who'd shunned them days ago were suddenly friendly, eager to be on the winning side. Elena accepted their words politely, but felt numb. She'd won, but it didn't feel real yet. You should celebrate, Dr. Harrison said. You beat Luke Maddox in open court. That doesn't happen often. Why did you do it? Elena asked. The testimony. You could have stayed silent. Because my wife died asking me to be braver, Harrison said simply. Figured this was a good place to start. He tipped his hat. Congratulations on your marriage, by the way. Heard you got hitched this morning. News travels fast, Daniel said. It's Silver Creek, Harrison replied. News travels faster than common sense. After he left, Elena and Daniel stood on the courthouse steps, watching the crowd disperse. We should go home, Daniel said.
Where's home? Elena asked. Your ranch house burned down.
The boarding house is empty. We don't really have— We have each other, Daniel interrupted. That's home enough for now. Elena leaned against him, exhausted and relieved and terrified all at once. What do we do now? Now? Daniel smiled slightly. Now we build something new. 2 days later, Elena made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She sold the boarding house. Not to Luke Maddox, to Mrs. Chen and her daughter, who'd been quietly saving money for years to start their own business. Elena sold it to them for exactly what she'd invested in the barn rebuild. Nothing more. Are you sure? Mrs. Chen asked, her eyes wide. This is your home. It was, Elena said, but I'm ready for something different now. The money from the sale went into rebuilding Daniel's house and barn properly. Stone and timber that would last, built to withstand Montana winters and men like Luke Maddox. Elena moved to the ranch before construction was even finished, living in a temporary cabin while they worked. It was smaller than the boarding house, rougher, harder, but it was theirs. And for the first time in her life, Elena wasn't running a business to survive. She was building a life worth living. Luke Maddox left Silver Creek 3 weeks after the hearing. The investigation into his fraudulent documents had uncovered years of similar schemes. Property he'd acquired through coercion, businesses he'd destroyed through false claims, people he'd driven out through intimidation and lies. The territorial governor got involved. Luke's assets were frozen, pending further investigation. His ranch was seized, his reputation destroyed. He rode out of town on a cold November morning, his expensive horse carrying him toward a future considerably less comfortable than his past. Elena watched him go from the porch of the new house, which was finally finished. "Do you feel sorry for him?" Daniel asked, coming to stand beside her. "No," Elena said honestly. "I feel sorry for everyone he hurt before us. But I'm glad he can't hurt anyone else." "He'll probably land on his feet somewhere," Daniel said. "Men like that usually do." "Maybe," Elena agreed. "But it won't be here." They stood in silence, watching the dust from Luke's horse settle on the road. Then Daniel said, "I have something for you." He led her inside to the main room, where he'd set up a desk by the window. On it was a new ledger, blank pages waiting to be filled. "What's this?" Elena asked. "Thought you might want to keep records," Daniel said, "like Thomas did. Track the ranch, the cattle, the money. Build something that lasts." Elena ran her fingers over the leather cover, feeling emotion tighten her throat. "You want me to manage the finances?" "I want us to manage them together," Daniel corrected. "This isn't my ranch or your ranch. It's ours. Everything we build from here, we build together." Elena opened the first page and saw Daniel had already made an entry. Today's date and 2 words. New beginning. She picked up the pen, thought for a moment, then added her own entry beneath his. Built on courage. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow and forcing them indoors for long, quiet evenings by the fire. Elena discovered she liked ranch life more than she'd expected. The physical work felt honest in a way the boarding house never had. Mending fences, feeding cattle, breaking ice on water troughs in the freezing dawn. It was hard, exhausting, and strangely satisfying. She also discovered she was good at it. Her years of managing a business translated well to managing a ranch. She kept meticulous records, negotiated better prices on supplies, and organized their operation with an efficiency that impressed even Daniel. "You're a natural," he said one night, watching her update the ledger. "I'm practical," Elena corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" She looked up at him,
This man she'd married on the worst day of her life, who'd become the best decision she'd ever made. "Yes," she said. "Being natural means it comes easy. Being practical means you work hard because it matters." "And this matters to you?" Daniel asked. "Yes," Elena said simply. "It does." Spring arrived slowly, melting snow revealing green grass and new possibilities. The ranch began to prosper, not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. They sold cattle at good prices, bred their stock carefully, built relationships with other ranchers who respected their work ethic. People in Silver Creek slowly changed their opinions. The whispers didn't stop entirely. Small towns never forget. But they softened. Elena and Daniel became just another ranch couple, working hard and keeping to themselves. Some of the people who'd supported them during the hearing became genuine friends. Dr. Harrison invited them for dinner regularly. Mrs. Chen brought them vegetables from her garden. Old Man Hendricks stopped by occasionally to share advice about cattle breeding and tell stories about the early days of the territory. Even Sheriff Moore thought you two were heading for disaster, but you've built something solid here. "We got lucky," Daniel said. "No," Morgan corrected. "You got brave. There's a difference." 1 year after the hearing, Elena stood on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. She was 40 years old now. Her hands were rougher than they'd been at the boarding house, her face more weathered from sun and wind. She'd probably never be considered young or beautiful by conventional standards, but she'd never felt more alive. Daniel came out to join her, sliding an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different everything is from what I expected," Elena said. "Good different or bad different?" "Just different," Elena said. "A year ago I thought my life was ending. Thought being almost 40 meant being invisible, unwanted, past my time for anything meaningful." "And now?" Elena leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. "Now I know that was nonsense. Life doesn't end because you're not young anymore. It just changes, and sometimes the changes are better than anything you had before." "Even with all the struggles?" Daniel asked. "The fire, the hearing, Luke's attacks, rebuilding everything from nothing?" "Especially because of those things," Elena said. "They proved I was stronger than I thought, that we were stronger together than either of us could be alone." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "You saved me, you know." "I thought you saved me." "We saved each other," Daniel said. "That's how this works." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains, the sky deepening from gold to crimson to purple. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked quietly. "Choosing me instead of someone younger who could have given you children, an easier life?" "Never," Daniel said immediately. "Not once. Not for a second." "How can you be so sure?" "Because every morning I wake up next to you and feel grateful," Daniel said. "Because you challenge me, support me, argue with me, and make me better than I'd be without you. Because love isn't about age or convenience or what makes sense on paper. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be brave enough to live fully." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "I married a smart woman," Daniel said. "Some of it had to rub off eventually." Elena laughed, wiping her eyes. "You're impossible. You love me anyway." "I do," Elena agreed. "God help me. I really do." 2 years passed in the rhythm of seasons and hard work. The ranch continued to grow. They hired help during busy seasons, built a larger barn, expanded their herd. Elena's careful management and Daniel's ranching expertise proved to be a formidable combination. They faced challenges, harsh winters, disease in the cattle, equipment failures, the endless financial pressures of running a ranch. But they faced them together, and that made all the difference. Elena discovered she had a talent for breeding horses, an unexpected skill that became a profitable side business. Daniel discovered he enjoyed teaching younger ranchers, sharing knowledge he'd accumulated over years of hard experience. They built something that would last. Not just property and livestock, but a life with meaning and purpose. And through it all, they remained what they'd been from the beginning. Two people who chose each other when the world said they shouldn't, who built love from courage and stubbornness, an absolute refusal to accept limitations others tried to impose.
5 years after that dusty afternoon, when Elena had stood on her porch and told Daniel he deserved someone younger, she stood in the same spot, on a different porch, watching the same man work with a young horse in the training corral. He was 45 now, his hair graying at the temples, his body showing the wear of years spent working the land. She was 44, her own hair showing silver threads, her hands permanently calloused from ranch work. They were older, weathered, marked by time and labor. They were also happier than either had ever been. Daniel looked up from his work and saw her watching. He smiled, that same smile from years ago that had told her he knew something she didn't. Now she knew it too. She knew that love didn't belong to the young and beautiful. It belonged to the brave and true. It belonged to people willing to risk everything for something real, who chose partnership over perfection, who built futures from hope instead of fear. She knew that age was just a number, that wrinkles were just proof of time lived, that the best years of her life had started when she stopped believing they were over. Most importantly, she knew that she'd been wrong that afternoon 5 years ago. Daniel didn't deserve someone younger. He deserved exactly what he got. A woman who matched his courage with her own, who fought beside him instead of behind him, who loved him not because it was easy, but because it was right. And she deserved him too. And she would never forget it again. Love does not belong to youth. It belongs to courage. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is believe they are still worthy of it.